So hello, everyone, and welcome to Gender Justice in Nepal, Political Power and Dignified Menstruation with Radha Paudel and Binda Pandey. This event is co-organized by the UBC Himalaya Program and the Nepal Cultural Society of BC. So thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Elsie Lewison, and I am a member of the UBC Himalaya Program Steering Committee, and I'm going to be co-moderating this event with Ramji Parajuli. So before we move into introductions, I want to take a moment to recognize that the UBC Vancouver campus, where the Himalaya program is based, is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. So because the subject of our talk today is gender justice, I also wanted to draw a connection to ongoing struggles for gender justice, and specifically Indigenous gender justice here in Canada. A 2019 report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls found that persistent and deliberate human and Indigenous rights violations and abuses that were perpetuated historically and maintained today by the Canadian state are the cause of Canada's staggering rates of violence against Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people. So I'm going to include a link in the chat to the report's 231 calls for justice, and I encourage you to take a look when you have some time. So I also wanted to mention just a few Zoom technical notes. Because this is a webinar, attendees won't be able to use their microphones or cameras, and any messages that you send using the chat function will only be viewed by us hosts. So please only use the chat for kind of technical issues. For questions for the presenters, please use the Q&A function. And I really encourage you to submit questions at any time, and we will return to these questions at the end of the presentations. And you're welcome to submit questions in Nepali as well as English. Note that only us hosts will be able to see the questions that are submitted, so we'll be reading them out loud. So with that, I'm going to turn the stage over to Professor Sarah Schneiderman and Pratima Parajuli, who are going to say a few words about the UBC Himalaya program and then the Nepal Cultural Society of BC.
Great, thank you very much, Elsie. Welcome everybody. Namaste, sabaile swagat sa. We're very pleased to have you here this evening for the first UBC Himalaya program event of 2022. And we were really pleased that we could reschedule this from last fall after having to postpone it. I just want to say a few words about the UBC Himalaya program for people who may be new to this forum. We are a transdisciplinary network across UBC, involving students, faculty, and staff, as well as community members across the Lower Mainland who have shared interests across the Himalayan region. And every year we run an event series. Mostly it's been online for the last 2 years. That's one of our main activities. And the other primary activity is coordinating summer intensive language courses in both the Nepali and Tibetan languages. And you can see on the screen now information about the Tibetan and Nepali language courses on our website. Perhaps Belinda could put in the chat the address for the link for the website in case people are interested in further information. So I just wanted to mention that we do have the dates for the summer Nepali and Tibetan community engaged language courses. They've just been announced and registration will be opening soon. So you can go to our website for more information. And these are 2-week courses that blend intensive instruction in the classroom with community engagement activities. We have wonderful opportunities to connect with members of the Nepal Cultural Society of BC, which is our co-host this evening, as well as many other organizations and sites across the region. Thanks. Belinda, could we have the next slide, please? And I just want to mention that the Himalaya program is coordinated collaboratively by several faculty members, postdoctoral fellows, and student program assistants. And it's a labor of love, shared work. And you can see on the screen our steering committee. And I just want to thank everybody who's been involved in supporting both this event and as well as our program in general. In particular, this evening, I wanted to thank our current student program assistant, Belinda Suen, who is doing all the behind the scenes work to make this possible in the online format, as well as communicating with our speakers. I'd also like to thank Elsie Lewison, whom you heard from already, who's one of our postdoctoral fellows, who's brought all of this together over many months. And finally, I'd like to thank Ramji Parajuli, who first suggested the idea of organizing this event around these themes and inviting our wonderful guest speakers this evening. So thank you, Ramji, also for pushing us in new directions. This is the first time that we've actually had speakers from Nepal at a UBC Himalaya program event. So thank you all for your efforts to be here. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Pratima Padajuli, who is the Vice President of the Nepal Cultural Society of BC, NCSBC, our co-host for the evening. Pratima.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone, respected speakers and audiences. Namaskar. My name is Pratima Parajuli, and I'm the Vice President of Nepal Cultural Society of British Columbia. And it is a great honor of NCSBC to co-sponsor the webinar on such an important topic regarding women's reproductive health and safety. And this is my great pleasure to have few words to welcome our respected speakers on behalf of NCSBC. And I'm really excited to hear from this qualified speakers and leaders, Radha Paudel and Dr. Binda Pandey. NCSBC is the oldest community organization founded in 1998 and has been actively working for the Nepalese community to promote our culture in Canadian soil, as well as to integrate Nepalese with other Canadian communities via networking, however, remaining connected with our own roots. It is a volunteer organization and basically working on a volunteer basis. With the progressive mission of this collaboration and integration, NCSBC started collaborating with the Himalayan program at UBC in 2016. And the importance of such collaboration is mainly bringing voices from Nepal to the wider community or wider audiences. And today's webinar, Gender Justice in Nepal, Political Power and Dignified Menstruation, is one of those efforts. And such collaboration provides an opportunity to make us aware of some of the issues faced back in our home country and motivates us to address or at least to create a bigger voice, louder voice to fight against them. And along with that, not just the adults, but the youth in the community as well will have the opportunity to learn about their home country and being far away from home. We live in privileged society here in Canada where we may not have faced all this, have not faced or be aware of these issues that are frequent in our home country, such as dignified menstruation. This kind of collaboration and kind of programs will bring issues to international platform where we can have the chance to be held accountable to fight against the abuse of these human rights. We're also able to shed light on these kind of issues, empower the members of the society, our society, to work towards a solution. With collaboration between two groups like NCSBC and Himalayan program at UBC helps to result in such collaborative leadership, learning, decision-making, and making community aware of the present issues As I learned during my research, our respected speaker today, Radha Paudel, has done remarkable work, Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation, to bring this issue around unsafe menstruation onto the global platform already. As a primary care health provider myself in BC, the inclusive concept of menstruator, when I was reading through this document, I found this word that resonated so much because it's so inclusive for trans men and genderqueer and LGBTQ communities, instead of using women or female. So this particularly caught my attention. Thank you, Radha Paudel, Madam Radha Paudel. On the other hand, we all know that along with public awareness that on menstruation taboos and humiliation and shame and unsafe practices, we need a law policy to reinforce and be responsible for safe practices. And I think Dr. Binda Pandey is a political figure herself and has written a book which, according to many reviewers, provide great insight in what has to be done in order to have political gender equality and change the patriarchal mindset. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Pandey on the floor, and we're very excited to hear from you, both speakers. With this, I would like to end my few words and hand the floor to Ramji. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratimaji, and for such a nice commentary on NCSBC and our speakers. Without further ado, I am very privileged to introduce these distinguished speakers today. And I really thank the Himalayan program for giving me this opportunity. I am Ramji Parajuli, and I'm a member of the Nepali community here in British Columbia. Let me just briefly introduce Ms. Radha Paudel ji. And Ms. Paudel is an aesthetic nurse by training, but she is also recognized very well as a writer and an activist. To honor her literary capability and work, Nepal actually recognized her literary work known as Khalangama Hamala, literally translated into attack on Khalanga. Khalanga is one of the district headquarters in Jumla district, which is in far western Nepal. And she was awarded with one of the prestigious literary awards in Nepal, Madan Puraskar. And the book was about the Maoist attack in Jumla during the insurgency. Now, Ms. Paudel's position is that the absence of war is not equivalent to peace. So her fight against discriminatory practices in Nepal continues. She is a founder of a global network, as Pratimaji suggested earlier, called Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation, and pioneered her movement for dignified menstruation, an innovative and holistic approach to examining gender, human rights, and development discourses. And she speaks around the world on the topic and has also published 3 books on the subject, including Dignified Menstruation is Everyone's Business. And her struggle to educate and deconstruct the ill-conceived societal practices and tradition in Nepal continues, and her main goal is to empower girls and women to achieve gender justice in Nepal. Radhaji, you have the floor. Now it's your turn to share your observations with us.
Thank you so much. Namaste. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I saw the friends all around the world through my connection as well. And I must thank you to Ramji and Pratimaji for very comprehensive and articulative introduction. I think I don't have anything to speak now. They explain everything what I'm trying to explain in this presentation. This is my great pleasure and privilege. Thank you so much for organizing this opportunity. And I must thank you to Corona as well. Because of the Corona, first time you dare to bring the speakers virtually from Nepal. I have so many reasons to thank to Corona as well, but later. I have so many stories to tell. I have so long journey for dignified menstruation. However, due to time constraint, I will focus in few particular stories, and you may find my presentation very critical, complex, and very straightforward. Please bear with me. I also would encourage to follow websites and social media of Dignified Menstruation. I can imagine you have already followed the website because you speak from there. I really appreciate it. Let me start from my personal story. When I was about 7 years old, I knew first time about the menstrual discrimination from my mother and 3 sisters. I deeply traumatized. I traumatized in that level where I attempted suicide, but somehow it could not happen. And at the age of 14, when I had a first menstruation, I ran away from the house for 5 days without permission of my parents. I was living with the 2 minds and hearts all the time. I was thinking about how could I die, because I did not like to live as a girl child. I did not see any value to live as a girl. And then coincidentally, I got the opportunity to join the nursing college, and I knew the essence and physiology of the menstruation. Since then, I started to speak whatever possible, wherever possible about the menstruation. It is already 4 decades. While we talk about the menstrual discrimination, for me, it is a very, very big issue while we talk about gender justice or human rights. The menstrual discrimination is a sets of practices like taboos, shyness, stigma, restriction, abuses, violences associated with the menstruation. I would repeat here because it will keep coming. That refers to the taboos, shyness, stigma, restriction, abuses, violences associated with the menstruation. And it is not only about the 5 days of the bleeding, but also throughout the life cycle of the menstruators. As Pratimaji already highlighted, it is not only about the women, it is also about to all who born with the ovary and the uterus. And it is a form of sexual and gender-based violence, according to the definition of the UN, and also the violation of the human right. And menstrual discrimination is practicing across the globe with a different name, forms, and the magnitude. It is very complex and multifaceted. In this book, you can find the all testimonies from different countries across the globe. This book is available online. These are the 2 examples. You can see in Ghana, Burundi, Nigeria, South Sudan, Egypt, Bangladesh, Nepal, Ecuador, Argentina, Bolivia, Australia, UK, and Canada. I saw the friends, Kathy from Canada, and maybe the others, ODT, they also know about it. One of the contributors of the book of Dignified Menstruation, a Practical Handbook from Canada, she explained what kind of practices over there in Canada. And you can find over there. While going through these all examples, we need to ask the questions. During menstruation or because of the menstruation, don't their right to dignity violated? Likewise, right to food, right to participation, right to freedom. These are the few examples only. While following the practice in the name of the culture or religion or the pride, the fundamental human rights are violated. The menstrual discrimination primarily construct the power and patriarchy. Here, this slide little bit connect with the psychology or physiology of the child's brain. We need to consider while discussing this slide. Between the age of 6 to 9 years, it depending on the context, if the family is practicing so many restrictions or abuses during menstruation, child learn or know about the menstruation early. But in urban or in some families, it will take more longer times, maybe 8 years or 9 years. It comes from the 40 years journey. Both girl and boy knows something about menstrual practice or menstrual discrimination from their mother, newspaper, movie, friends, etc. And because of that, girl considered herself as an impure, dirty, powerless, inferior. Boys considered himself pure, powerful, privileged, superior. And this is how, since childhood, the power construct and systematically patriarchy construct, and that perpetuate the sexual and gender-based violence. Let me give one example. Globally, the home is not a safe place. No matter whether you live in Canada or in Nepal. You can see the varieties of the sexual and gender-based violence. We all know that the UN claimed that 1 in 3 women experience either physical, sexual, or any kind of violence. To me, it is wrong, because the menstrual discrimination to acknowledge is sexual and gender-based violence. It is not counted yet. We don't discuss about the menstrual discrimination. Let me discuss very briefly about the impact. First impact is the power and patriarchy. How does the menstrual discrimination play a vital role to construct the power and patriarchy, and that apply throughout the life cycle. And one is very important for the education. Because of the menstrual practices, discriminatory practices, 5 days in a month or 2 months in a year is interrupted regards to the education or school or learning. The socialization part of the menstrual discriminations constantly dehumanize. And in the meantime, because of the interruption in schooling or learning at home, at school, her education interrupted, and eventually she trapped with early or volunteer or forced child marriage. Globally, we keep talking about eliminating child marriage, and it is very prominent at the era of 2030 agenda. But we are not touch the menstrual discrimination while we talk about the child marriage. Right now, we are reviewing the policies over the 1 century, and we don't find the discussion around menstrual discrimination while implementing the activities around child marriage. Likewise, in this slide, the same idea, the menstrual discrimination has a strong connection throughout the life cycle, womb to tomb. Why does sex selection abortion is happening? What is the underlying reason? Why do we see the girl child in a box or in a bushes after the birth if there is no any technology to find out the sex before the birth? So these kind of things we need to think or analyze very critically. The systematically, the connection with the menstrual discrimination goes throughout the life cycle is a spiral way, and it also goes in a multiplier effect. In earlier slide, we discussed about the impact on education, and is a hindrance in education that menstruators trap on a child marriage. So menstrual discrimination plays as a cause and effect for other forms of sexual and gender-based violence. So once she has a menstruation, she or he has a menstruation, it goes in a more stronger way. It deeply embedded within the person, within the psychology. So it's a bit complex. And this is my way of not able to make understand as well, but we can discuss later. So in this given scenario, let's examine the International Human Rights Instrument. To me, menstrual discrimination is not only missing in an international human rights discourse, but also narrowing down of its scope. Since 1948, globally, we keep talking about the human rights declaration or dignity all the time. Dignity is a human right principles. But menstrual discrimination, yet to acknowledge as a violation of the human which human rights are not the outcome of our socialization. It exists in this universe since beginning. So it's a very, sometimes it's ridiculous. Sometimes I'm so puzzled. And likewise, we keep talking about the CEDAW since 1979. To me, CEDAW failed to acknowledge the role of the menstrual discrimination for construction of the power and patriarchy, and play a role as a cause and effect for many sexual and gender-based violence, as we discussed in earlier slides. And another interesting thing, CEDAW used the word of the traditional harmful practices while talking about menstruation. It doesn't talk the menstrual practice across the globe as we discussed earlier. It simply talk about the word of the chopori, which is the form of menstrual discrimination from Nepal. It doesn't apply across the globe. At some point, the half of the population of this planet menstruate, and that menstrual practice has a connection throughout the life cycle. And we CEDAW put the one form of menstrual discrimination is a traditional harmful practices. And see in the picture, how could we compare between witchcraft and menstruation? Menstruation keeps coming in our life all the time as a gentle reminder. And the girls and boys and everyone keep thinking, oh, this is impure, this is dirty, this is a pollutant, this is taboo, we should not speak publicly. This is something awkward. And it's constantly strengthening the idea of the inferiority. Why the global north people suffering from gender pay gap? What is the underlying cause behind it? It's not about voting rights. It's not about the education. It's not about the other kind of economic development. When we see the gender equality, there is a gap, there is a differences, and what is the underlying cause behind it. Likewise, since 1944 ICPD conference, we means global community start to speak about the sexual and reproductive health rights. And my many colleagues argued with me that, oh no, we are talking about menstruation since long. In Nepal, when we started the Safe Mother program or reproductive health right program since 1998, we have been doing. But to me, no. We just talk about the developmental milestone. And medically, we talk about it, especially from the gynae and obstetric. Oh, okay, I'm done. So likewise, in the SDG, it is the youngest international document, and it also doesn't speak. Let me give one example from the goal number 8. Out of 17, 9 goals are directly connected with the menstrual discrimination. And goal number 8, decent work and the economic growth. And without having the dignified menstruation friendly environment, how could menstruating or premenopausal or menopausal women can work? Why did the doctors and nurses in Yuan in China took the contraceptive pills to avoid the menstruation while responding the COVID? So it is very serious issues. But the ILO's Convention 190 or the Sexual and Sexual Abuse and Exploitation Act, not only in Nepal, across the globe, they don't recognize the menstrual discrimination. Likewise, if you go through the menstrual movement at the global level, they talk about the pad, product, waste management, but they forget about the dignity part or menstrual discrimination. And recently, there is one research come up, and that also recognized that the menstrual stigma is on top agenda while we talk about the menstrual movement globally. It is very simple to understand and very complex. We often talk about the violence and sometimes talk about the discrimination, but we don't talk the menstrual discrimination, which is cross-cutting across every segment of our universe. And in this connection, dignified menstruation is a free form of discrimination for those who born with the uterus and ovaries, 24/7 hours of life. Pandemic, anywhere, there is no any excuses, and it has to go throughout the ecological model. I don't like to go through this. These are some activities we have done in Nepal. You can find in many book chapters and website. And we also have been doing some campaigns at the global level. You can see the countries. And we also started, we means here in Nepal, Nepal initiated the Dignified Menstruation Day for the 8th December. It started from 2019, and it is endorsed by the Ministry of Women, Children and Senior Citizen. And the second year workshop, we organized the 3 days international workshop first time at the global history, and concluded with the triple points declaration call for action on dignified menstruation. And last year this is the 3rd year, and it was about dignified menopause. All presentations are available on this website. These are the few glimpses of the activities what we have been doing. These are the publications which specifically focus on the dignified menstruation. We also publish few articles and journals, and some are on the process. The challenge is very beautiful. Despite all this impact, we have a zero funding. Seems like crazy, and zero moral support. I would say zero, because all the time we receiving the blaming, exclusion, threatening, and even we criticized from the politicians, activists, educated people. So I don't like to go through all. You can find in the social media as well. And the way forward is dialogue at home, school, or place, everywhere, including even. And we need to listen to the survivors. Personalize the dignified menstruation, politicize the dignified menstruation. It should be the agenda for the politicians, political parties, and have to do so many research. There is no research yet, and we have to do the many researches. So, and we also need to ask ourselves whether our activities, especially in the product, menstrual dignified menstrual friendly or not, because it is easy and everyone talk about the menstrual product. So we need to think. I'm done. It has to go through as a cross-cutting issue across the ministries. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Radhaji, for making such an eloquent and comprehensive presentation. And I didn't realize that so all these, I was only thinking about the local national documents, which ignore the concept of menstrual discrimination. But you indicated that the global documents also are deficient in acknowledging this issue as a violation of women's rights. Thank you very much for educating us. I was only thinking about when you said Agenda 30, and you wanted to connect your discussion with Agenda 30. I thought maybe goal number 3 and 5 were relevant, but you connected the issue with a whole lot of goals within the 2030 agenda. Thank you very much. So let me, I will come up with, I have a curiosity. I'll ask you the question later. Let us invite our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Binda Pandey, and she has multiple sort of hats. She is a politician, a policymaker, and a trade union activist with decades of experience in advocating for gender justice and human rights in Nepal. She has served as a member of the first Nepalese Constituent Assembly and as a member of the first federal parliament since 2017, and representing the Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Marxist-Leninist, or UML in short. I found that her former academic institution, Asian Institute of Technology, where she studied gender and development, was very happy, just like many of us, when she was re-elected to the parliament in 2017 or 18. So I just noted that. Thank you very much. And then she was a founding member of the National Women Commission and has held senior leadership positions at G-Fund, acronym for General Confederation for Nepali Trade Unions. Dr. Pandey holds a PhD in Women Empowerment in Politics from Kathmandu University and is the author of a recently published book titled Women in Nepali Politics. Just one particular note from my side, when she was a member of the assembly, she persuaded fellow members in the assembly to change the Nepali title of the presidency in Nepal because the Nepali name of the president in Nepal had gender sort of a sensitivity. Male-centric name was there. I thought it was a genuine demand to make it gender neutral, but I guess the struggle is still continuing, Bindaji, I guess. Hopefully someday they will change the official Nepali name of the president. Rather than calling Rashtrapati, they will start calling Rashtradecha, which is gender neutral. All right, on that note, Radhaji, the floor is yours. I'm sorry, Bindaji, I'm sorry for mixing it up. Bindaji, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you very much. So it is really a very good opportunity for me, and this is my privilege to talk about this matter with our Nepali community living outside country, and then still trying to linking with the Nepali politics and Nepali the social change, and then it is really very good opportunity to be with the part of this program organizing by the University of British Columbia. So thank you very much. So I'll just start to go through my slide, and we Nepali politicians have practice, the talking long and long, but this limiting within this 20 minutes. So I'll try my best. And I'm just giving the name of this, my presentation, this the fighting for gender and the social justice within and through the politics. And then this the achievement and the challenges ahead. Let me begin with this, when we started this social justice movement. So during that time, we were having this Rana regime, which was an oligarchy and autocratic totally. And during that time, 1970, the one widow woman called Yogmaya from the eastern part of Nepal. So she was the pioneer of this the social justice movement, and collectively mobilizing the citizen to demand for the social justice. And they call that time it is a Dharma Rajya. So Dharma Rajya means nowadays we translate as the social justice. Then during that time, she was just raising not only the gender agenda, she was raising, connecting the issue gender, class, and caste. And regarding this, the gender agendas, she was voicing out against the polygamy, unequal marriage, and then she was demanding for this, the widow marriage. And regarding the class issues, and during that time, all kinds of the slavery was there. She was demanding the ending of this the slavery, and then in all kinds of the labor exploitation. And then regarding the caste also, still we have that problem in the society, this touchability. So even during that time, she was allowing all the the caste people to be together and then the fight together. And then earlier the Radhaji was talking about this the menstruation. So during this time when she was having these kinds of activities, even this untouchability, temporary untouchability regarding the relating with the women's body, it was also she was against that as well. Then when the political movement organizationally or collectively, it was started only after 20 years of that social movement. So in 1937, this is the first time we have a first political party we call the Nepal Praja Parishad. And then it was formed by all the men, but also when the men, they were in the prison, during that time, the women, they play a very vital role. We can just call the name, this the Revanta Kumari, Sita Sharma, Ramaya Paudel, she was one of the cleaners, and then Chandrakanta. So these are the women, they were really helping them a lot. Within and outside the prison also. Then after that, when the movement was continued, and then 1947, that's the first time in the eastern part of Nepal, the workers, they come out with this, the demands, and then they launched the strike, and then they formed the trade union also. So during that time also, when all the men, they were arrested, then under the leadership of the Dibya Koirala, so the women, they come on the street, and then they launch the program, means the strike, and they were also arrested later on. At the same time, this the Nanda Nepal, she was one of the workers in the jute factory. So in 1951, she launched 27 days long hunger strike, demanding the opening of that closed factory. And then another Parvati, we can pick up her name, and she gave birth her son when she was in the field of the strike. And later on, she called her Hartaliki Ma as well, because Hartaliki Ma means this the mother of the striker. So at the same year, because this workers' strike, it was taken in March, and later in May, there was a demonstration for the civil right, demanding with the civil right, and they formed afterwards this the Nepal Women Organization. So this is the first political women organization in Nepal. And when they were organizing the civil rights demonstration, that time also the 4 women, they were arrested, and after 2 weeks when they released, so some of them, they were not allowed even to go inside the family, because being in the prison is it was a matter of this dignity of the family that time. And then this Snehlata, Sahana, Sadhana, Mangala, very prominent women who were launching all these things. And then during that time that they were, after forming this organization, they went to the Rana Prime Minister also demanding the women's issues like equal opportunity for education, employment, property right, etc. So this is the, I'm just trying to show the how the women's movement and women's issues, political, agendas, it was politicalized and then continue as a part of the movement. So 1951, when there was, the overthrow of this Rana regime, and then the first time we got this multi-party system, during that time, there's the integral part of the society as a women's, they were participating, and then major agenda was education, employment, and the suffrage. But after 10 years, the democracy was snatched by the monarchy, and then the partyless system was imposed. So for almost a decade, there was not very organized form of the struggle and movement, but afterwards, after 1975, actually, slowly they started to come together again, and then political parties also, they started to organize themselves as the underground activities, and the women's, students, and all other the mass movement, it started to gear up. And during that time, that movement was, calling the women's movement, women's as a half of the sky. And then major agenda were this identity, property, education, employment, and then violence against women. So these are the major agenda they were launching during that time. So after 30 years of this, monarchy ruled. 1990, there was a restoration of the multi-party system, and then this total monarchy, it was turned into the constitutional monarchy. So during that time, when we are talking earlier, it is a half of the sky, but now then the women started to claim we are not only the sky, we are a half of the land as well. And during that time also, we are talking about this identity, property, violence against women, and then the participation issues. Earlier, mostly we are talking about the education and employment, but afterwards, we started to talk about the women's participation, not only limited in the employment and then the education, even in the political field, and everywhere the women should be there, and then especially in the policy making, women should be the part of that. So this agenda will continue, and then in 2006 we replaced the monarchy, and then now we have this Federal Democratic Republic Nepal. So after 1990 and 1996, the Maoist movement also was started. After 1993, women started to be part of the parliament as well, and then in the parliament, in the political parties, and then in this army struggle as well, the women's agenda were voiced out very loudly. And when we arrived in the 2006, then we started to call that we are the equal citizen. And then in regards to the identity, in regards to the right to have this inheritance property right, ending violence against women, and then this the participation. It is participation, not only the women participation, it should be the inclusive participation. So after 2006, we started to talk about this, the inclusion as well. And the inclusion, it is not only regarding the, the women's participation in the, as a whole, society, wherever, there is just some structure, and there should be the inclusive participation in the very seen way. Then, yeah, it is just, to remind how we move ahead. In 1972, the women, they joined this, the Japa arm struggle, we call it, the eastern part, the first time after this monarchy snatched the democracy, and then some of the young, they come up with this army struggle, and women's joined that struggle since the beginning. And 1978-79, there was students uprising. So in that movement also, since the beginning, women's, they were the part. In 1990, the very countable number of the women's, they participated. And this 1 decade long, this the Maoist movement also, actually they mainstream the women's in the movement, not only in the movement. And until that time, the state was thinking that the women's, they should not be that strong to hold the state arm. But after having this, the women's also, they have access to the state arms also, means in the army and in the police, armed force, the women started to join. And 2006 movement, it was an emerging participation of the women's, and almost the half of the state, it was full, and it was occupied by women that time. Then if we'll go to the this parliamentary side, this is the achievement as 1951. So the women's, they got right to vote, but we exercise only in the 1953, because that time we had a election. And the first parliamentary election was in 1958, and that time one woman, she got the this opportunity to run on election under the party, and she won the election, and she became an MP and a minister that time. But some other women also, they were independently, they were running, but none of them, they won. And 1960 to 90 period, it was absolute monarchy, so I'm not talking much about that time. In 1990, we were raising the issue, at least in the upper house, there should be the 50% women candidacy. It was a demand of the women's, but our constitution make only this, the 5% candidacy. And 1997, we make another law, this the 20% women quota in the local level. And 2006, 1/3 women candidacy. And then when we have a new constitution, it is not only the candidacy, there should be at least the 1/3 women in the elected body. So it was a quota. But the women's fundamental rights says this is the proportionate participation in all the state mechanisms should be there. So, but up to now, none of the political party, they are talking about this as a party as a whole. But the women's politician, and then this the civil society who are in favor of this gender equality. So they are raising that issues. And this is just the sum of the data from 1991 up to now. So though during that time there was a 5% quota for as a candidacy, but for 2 elections there was a less than that number who participated in the parliament. And then in 2008 also, this the Constituent Assembly, there was a 1/3 quota, means the candidacy. But less than 1/3 women, they were representing in the Constituent Assembly. But only after ensuring that the 1/3 quota should be as a result in the parliament, and the elected body. So only after this, 2017. So now we have this 33.5% women in the elected, in that body. So if we'll just go through this, our constitution, there is one article we call the women's right. Under the women's right, there is a few agendas. So it is equal right to identity. Identity means it is the lineage, and right to be free from violence against women, and then right to inclusive and proportionate participation in the state, all state mechanism. It is not only the political party and then the parliament and the elected body, and the equal right to property and right to maternal health, and special right provision in the education, health, employment, and the social security. So these are the things. But what we are doing right now, we're together with some of the this organization formed by the lawyers. So we are just trying to study and then going through all this legal provision which is contradicting with this. So we have already identified about the 4 dozen laws they are contradicting with this provision. So according to our constitution is the supreme law, and then if any provision contradicting, it should be changed. So we are trying to bring this issue also in the parliament, but now because of this the COVID, parliament is not going on, and then all our colleagues, they are not being able to come for the discussion. So maybe the next week we'll start it again. And the election, again, this is the sum of the data after 2017. So this is, if we'll talk about in the totality, it is 41.1% women. They are in all local to federal level. But the major role, they are not being able to have that. But the strategy behind this success, at least we call it, we are moving ahead. So what is the strategy we follow for these kinds of process? So this the collective move to include the gender agenda in the constitution. One thing is this the cross-party common gender agenda. So all the party, we are coming together and then identifying the common agenda. Then within the parliament also, that time we formed the women caucus, and then we push the agenda together. And this the regular cooperation among the political women's movement, means women's in the parliament, women's in the political party, and then the women's who organization who are politically linking. So we have a cooperation, and then the close networking with the community and the civil society movement as well. And then issue-based consultation with the professional academia and then the experts. These are the strategy we were following, and we are following now also. But what are still we have the weaknesses in the politics. The major obstacle are the lack of the enabling environment for women to act very openly and then actively. And then the strong patriarchal mindset cause not accepted women as a leader, as a politics. Normally they call the women's leader. It is not the leader of the politics. And another is this expect only the women to be changed, because we talk a lot about this, the women's empowerment, mainstreaming, etc. But because of this, the patriarchal values and norms, not only the women can be changed and make change, but unless the men, they will be changed. So we cannot achieve the equality. But always we talk that the women should be changed, and women should be the strong. Women should come out. Women should participate in the public space. So this is the one of the weaknesses, and the caste-based discrimination caused the untouchability, including the menstruation and the outcasted group also. This is the caste-based system. This is the one thing, and then this the menstruation, and then during this the maternal time. This is also in the some group. I don't say it is the whole Nepal, but the some group, and then that the ruling group, they have this kinds of problem and this attitude. And violence against women is the biggest challenge now, which is socially linked with the family honor. And then even within the politics, if the women, they started to speak loudly to bring the agenda strongly, and then the violence started even within political sphere. And then the challenge ahead is the participation is limited within quota, because the quota, it is a it should be the the lower based, but all the political parties and then the state mechanism also, they are just counting the quota if it is necessary to recognize that institution, and then they make that happen. Otherwise, the tokenism is still there. We can just see the cabinet and the party's executive position, and then when the state nominating this state different bodies, and then among that also this the nepotism is a big problem. It is out proper of the constitutional and legal provision. I already mentioned that according to this, the women's right as a fundamental right, there is a proportionate representation provision is there, but we are not respecting that. And there is a special provision we can make to mainstream the women's, but that is also not really being in the practice. And other is this the lack of the proper understanding and the use of the essence of the affirmative action. Because when we talk about affirmative action, we are just talking about this quantity, means the quota, but the quality, mentoring, modeling. So these things, it is not only the women's. It should be the men also should be the part of that. But I mentioned earlier that only we expect women to be changed, and then the men, they are not even thinking themselves. We also have to be changed if we really want to make society more justice based. And another is this the reluctant of the internalizing and linking feminism as necessary integral phenomena to achieve the socialism, as mentioned in the constitution. Because in constitution, we have mentioned that we'll achieve and we'll move towards the socialism. But when we talk about this feminism is still, it is a this terminology it takes negatively. And then if we really voice out very loudly and then strongly regarding this the gender agenda, and then our leaders, they say don't be feminist. So it means the feminism, they take it negatively up to now. And then but if we'll go through all the the political parties policy, the ingredients of this the social feminism is we can find there. And then when we talk about implementation and then their understanding, okay, women should be independently, economically independent. Afterwards, that they can be the part of this and that. And mostly I call it is a Marxist feminist. And then when we talk about the practice, and in practice, okay, there is a leverage, and then this the 1/3 quota, it is for the the women's, but rest of the part also you can compete and you can come, you can fight. So you should not always ask for this and that. So this kinds of contradiction between policy understanding and the practice is still there in the political movement and political sphere. So the issues to continue for fighting is still, I have identified a few. It is very, very important. One is this the equal status as citizen, because mother and the status of the father and mother, and then the spouse as a husband and wife, it is not equal according to our constitution. So we need to change our constitutional provision in this regard, and harmonizing the legal provision with this constitutional provision. So it is another challenge. So now the study is going on. So, but it will take some years again to go to have a change. And the proper understanding of gender, social justice, and then the fighting patriarchy and the caste system. It is I mentioned that this the feminism and then socialism, and then how to achieve this, and who have to be changed. So all these things still there is not there is no proper understanding as a community, means the society as a country as a whole. And in the biasness towards the feminism I already mentioned, and then there's a proportionate participation in decision making. And now all the political parties, they have they have 1/3 women participation in all level, but it is just as a member, and then in the decision making level still they are not being a part of that. We can just say the CPN UML, we have out of 19 only the 2 women they are in the position, and the Nepali Congress out of 13 there is only 1 woman in the position, and then Maoist still they have not decided. So this is the situation. And then they are having at least the 1/3 women, because if there is no 1/3 women in the committee, and it will not be registered in the election commission, only for this the registration matter. So they are compelling to have that. And then the fighting back to the eradication of violence against women, it is a big issue. And then in this regards also, always if there is something happen, and where is the women's movement, where are the women's leader, but who are making all this happening? So the male, basically more than 95% cases, male, they are the part of this the violence. So until and unless they would not be changed, so we cannot eradicate the violence against women. That's why it should be the common agenda. It should not be the only women's agenda. So we are campaigning for that also, and then we are trying to bring that issue also. So in conclusion, feminism is homegrown integral part of the Nepali politics since the beginning. When the Yogmaya started, there was already the feminist agendas. So because I'm just the trying to mention this line here, because mostly when we just started earlier, and then the feminism, it is a Western phenomena, it comes from the Western, you don't just make a copy. But later on, especially when I was doing my PhD thesis, and then I realized that this the feminism, it is our homegrown integral part of the politics. And then we take some agendas and some experiences from outside the country, that is as a reference material and reference agenda. So the women are active part of the movement, but not mere consumer of the achievement, because now women, you have got this much and that much and this position and that position. So nowadays when we raise the issues, and then there was a comment like that. So my conclusion is that we are not only asking for something after achieving this the democracy. We are the part of the democracy since the beginning, and this the political movement, it is a linking with the sectoral movement. It is the key to the achievement. So we have to make that kinds of linking, and then the strategy continue again and strengthen that. And then fighting patriarchy within organization and the party are much more challenging than fighting in the society and the state, because we realized that earlier when there was autocracy, so even all our political party, they were just raising this issue of the equality. But when we achieve the democracy, and then to make it happen within a party, it is more the difficult. Now we are realizing And this cross sectors collective action play the vital role to overcome the gender subordination. And then finally, this the inconsistency in thinking, saying, and doing. It is a main problem now we have realized to achieve the gender justice in the society. So we have to go together and we have to fight, and we have to make aware our people, especially we have to focus our young people. That is also not only the girls and boys together. And then another one thing I like to add that only yesterday we got this the census preliminary, report, and our constitution has already identified that and recognized male, female, and sexual minorities. But the what data we have got yesterday, they have mentioned only the male and female number. But where is this the sexual minorities? We don't know. And then they are just in the social media they have started to ask whether there is any people who are under this the sexual minority or not. Otherwise, the total population which has been broadcasted, it is only the total male and female number as there. So I think that this is also one of the major agenda when we talk about the gender justice and the social justice. So thank you very much for listening me, and this much I talk now, and then if there is any question, any query or any clarification, and even any suggestion, so I'm expecting that. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Bindaji, for such a educational coverage of this issue of gender justice in Nepal, and your struggle and challenges, achievements, and opportunities in your statement. I have a curiosity that there was a common theme in both presentations, but this question is, let me direct this question to Bindaji first. The patriarchal aspect is quite insurmountable in Nepal. And someone commented that the fight against monarchy was successful, but the fight against patriarchy is still continuing. So under this scenario, I was looking at the data, global data on representation of women. This data set suggested that in the world, there are 28.2% women in the managerial position. And you indicated in your presentation that women are not in the leadership position because it's a patriarchal society. And now my curiosity is, if there were more women leaders, would it be easier to fight this cause of gender justice in Nepal? What do you think? What is your personal, I tend to believe that, yes, if there were more women leaders, I think the struggle would be much more easier. They would understand it much better than male individuals, even though they say that they are a feminist and they understand the problem, but it probably is very different having a woman leadership. What do you think, Bindaji, please?
Thank you very much. Of course, having more women, not only the women's as biology, women's with perspective. That is the one part, and the another is only the more women's with the women's perspective. It is not enough. So especially those people who are in the leadership position and decision-making position, they should have a clear understanding what is gender justice and what is the social justice. So if there is the 50% women leaders who are clear about the agenda, and then the rest of the 50%, if they are not aware about that, it doesn't make change. So women's as a biology, or that is the one part, and then the clear perspective, gender sensitivity, and then not only the sensitivity. So they have to be realized that if we want women in the position, sometimes we male or we have to leave that position for that also. So that kind of readiness among the, the male leaders also need. Otherwise, we can talk very nicely, but we cannot really practice in our life. That is my understanding.
Okay, thank you, Bindaji. Elsie, do you have a question for Bindaji?
Sorry. Oh, maybe we have a couple of questions from the guests, so maybe we could take a couple of those while we still have some time. Maybe we could start with Odette asked Radha, I understand the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation has impacted groups around the world. How have you brought together menstruators from countries everywhere to dialogue? So I guess the question is kind of, what was your strategy for kind of building this Global South Coalition?
Start?
Huh?
Shall I respond?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Elsie, and thank you, Aditi. It's really a good question. Everywhere, not only in Nepal, inviting the different stakeholders for dialogue and dignified menstruation depend on the funding. If you have a funding, if you have a good website, if you have enough human resources, everyone difficult. However, we never give up, and we keep trying many ways. The invitation for the entrance speakers, webinars, any kind of supporters in a website, and we also reach out through the networks because we have involvement with the varieties of international networks like Women Peacemaker, Women Empowerment, LGBTQI groups. So we engage with the different stakeholders, and we also, particularly the Radha Paudel Foundation and Global South Coalition, is working as a member or coordination committee member or the coordinator in different platforms at the global level. And it is easier to invite the interested friends for the speaker, for the supporter, something like that. And in the meantime, we also constantly try to grasp the opportunities at the global level. For example, we will be speaking on UNCSW platform in upcoming March. Last year also we spoke the urgency of dignified menstruation. And we also spoke on the Global Men Engagement Alliance. And in coming March, we will be speaking in the South Asia region Men Engagement Alliance. Our research paper already accepted. Just last month, I presented in a paper, Missing the Menstruation in COVID Pandemic in international conference, which is very technical, the microbiology global conference, which was organized in Italy, but we accepted. So we means the members of the Global South Coalition, the friends from Australia, Indonesia, Canada, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, they have been searching the opportunities, whatever possible. And we are trying to engage them. Sometimes we try to jump in. So it's a very different kind of strategy. I would say, if you ask the strategy, I would say blue ocean strategy. There is no other competitors. No one talk about the dignified menstruation, and no one like to understand it. And everything has to start. You have to punch the UN, you have to punch your government, punch the academia like you, activists, everyone. We have a scope everywhere. It's empty. And we are not expert. We are not expert indeed. We are trying to learn from your questions, from your challenges, and from our stories, what stories we have gone through it. In the beginning, of course, my personal story, my experience with my three sisters and mother saved me a lot. And at the meantime, I worked the more than 65 districts of the country during the wartime and beyond. And then I learned, and in the meantime, I got the opportunity to expose at the global level as well. So it is easier. And let me give one very interesting example. I was attending the one international conference, but due to the technical reason, I could not attend that program in Norway, Oslo. But I was in the same hotel, and it was about the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition. And I'm a nurse, and I was working around the reproductive health. And during the breakfast table, I started the conversation, and then I participated that conference. And during the conference, I spoke during the informal session, and I become the accountability and advocacy working group. And it was 2015, and they never talk about the menstruation. They are the reproductive health supplies coalition global network, and it was already 17 years their history, and they never talk. And because of my involvement, right now they have an independent menstrual health work stream, and they have been doing many researches, and also sponsored for the PhD student. So there are so many impacts, and we are so open, so honest, so flexible. Why I'm waking up and working up 24/7? Because we need the opportunity. And if I start to ask, oh, money, you need to give the money, and I'm busy, and no one knock us. So there is no strategy, blue ocean strategy, like an ocean. You can go anywhere and you can swim anywhere.
Well, it's really impressive what you've been able to build over the last few years with very little resources, and sort of building new frameworks for understanding this as well. Binda ji, there's also a question for you from the audience. So Harry Casey says, thank you for your insightful talk. My question is for Binda ji. Is this, given that Nepali women is not a single category, focusing on the political representation alone comes at the cost of many critical gender and social justice issues linked with lived experiences of women from marginalized sections of society. Could you speak on this issue? So sort of the intersection of gender with other forms of marginalization.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Actually, I mentioned much of the things relating with the political side. But if we go through the the other sectors, like in the economic activities, nowadays more and more women, they are becoming the independent in terms of the running their family. And but the majority of the women, they are involved in the informal sectors. And one of the agenda is that according to our laws, and informal sector workers also, they should be registered in the local level, and then after registering and after having this workers identity, they have to link up with this contributory social security fund as well. But this issue is still not in the practice, and then we are pushing this agenda. So the women's in terms of the education and the sports sector. So nowadays I'm giving the example is that in the university 2 times there was a convocation, and then in the convocation more than 60% of the gold medalists, they are the girls. So it is a good indication in the coming days. And then in the esports sectors also, though the women's, they are competing in the less number of the sports, but they are providing the more gold medal to the nation, even in the SAF game. And then recently there was a volleyball competition in the South Asia. So these are the indications that the women's, they are getting more and more empowered, and they are coming out. And then another is this, now the young and educated women, they are more interested to be the part of all this political process and all this the other sectors as well. So it is a good sign for the future. And whatever he talked about, he was asking that the inclusiveness, women's, of course, women, they are not the single category, and the male also, they are not the single category. That's why I mentioned that after 2006, when we got this Republican Nepal, since that movement, this the inclusion, the issue of the inclusion, it is one of the major agenda. And then now, if we see the women participation in the different sectors, economic activities, I think this other category women's means this the Janajati category might be the the more active than this the RA community. Mostly the RA community, it is a more conservative, I can say, because the majority of the Nepali who are joining this forum also, we are from that group. But I found this the RA community is more conservative than this the Janajati and other. And when we talk about the inclusion now, in the political, there is a cluster. So it means the all category, they can proportionately, they can join. And then in the government service also, in the formal sectors also, there is some category. So it is somehow the inclusive. But we have a feeling now that we have to give more focused on this, the Dalit and Madesi. So in those categories, still we have a difficult to have that level of the the leadership among the women's. But if we compare with this the 10 years back and now, among the women's also, it is a more inclusive leadership we can find. Not only the women, it is in the male also. But the problem is, again, there is other categories included, but this the sexual minority. None of the the area they have these kinds of the policy coverage to include in the this the any kinds of the policy. So that is, I think we have to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Binda ji. We have 2 minutes left, and maybe we can answer one last question. Radha ji, there's a question asking if you could elaborate dignified and what will make the menstrual experience dignified, but you only have 1 minute.
Thank you. While we talk about the dignified, we need to think from the perspective of the discrimination. Menstrual discrimination. We are not talking about the indigenous discrimination or discrimination during the pandemic or the disaster or sex or genders. We need to think from the perspective of the menstrual discrimination. Menstrual discrimination is an underlying cause for the all kind of discrimination and the violences, and it also constructs the power and patriarchy. From that perspective, we need to see the dignified. Dignified is a holistic approach. It has to go 24/7 from home to tomb. We cannot segregate, oh, this is only for the right now during the bleeding time or during the menopause, something like, not like that. I have only 1 minute, so it is difficult to answer such a very complex aspect. We need to think from the perspective of politics. Because of the menstrual practices, the political participation also what is called deprived, and the primary unit of the political participation or parliament is the kitchen, is a dining table. And in many cultures, during menstruation, menstruators could not participate in a kitchen or dining table. So we have to think from the perspective of politics, economics, environment, technology. There are so many aspects, and it has to go throughout the life cycle. For us, dignified is a lens. The gender and social inclusion policy never talk about the menstrual discrimination. Human rights never talk. And we have so many international human rights instruments, but we never talk, or we're missing the opportunity. In that sense, for us, the dignified is a new lens. It could be the new shifting for the feminism, development, and human rights. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much for answering that very quickly. And I think that's a really good note to wrap up on. I'd be happy to sit here and listen to you both speak all night on these issues. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time. So I'll just kind of bring the webinar to a close and say thank you so much to both of our presenters who have woken up very early to join us and have gone through a lot of emails and communication to organize this. So thank you again. And thanks to Ramji for helping to coordinate, and to Belinda for running all of the back-end Zoom webinar, taking care of all of that. Thanks again to Pratima and the Nepal Cultural Society of BC, and thanks to BBC Himalaya program. And finally, thanks to all of you, our audience, for joining us. And we hope to see you again at future Himalaya program events.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.